Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Menopause Matters in Librarianship. My name is Loida Garcia Fibo. I am delighted to be here with you for this important conversation hosted by the Reforma Kindness Affinity Group that I am leading with a group from Reforma and in collaboration with the American Library Association Committee on the Status of Women in Librarianship that I happen to chair. Although we refer to menopause in the title, today's conversation embraces the broader continuum, including perimenopause and postmenopause, where many of the most significant changes and workplace impacts occur. The Kindness Affinity Group continues to center care, compassion, and community within our profession. As part of this ongoing work, I would like to acknowledge a previous program in our series of programs, Community Care and Support for Library Workers, Holding Grief, Trauma, and Each Other. And this is available as a recording on the Reforma YouTube channel. Together, these programs reflect a growing commitment to addressing the human dimensions of library work, our well-being, our challenges, and the ways we support one another. Today's session focuses on a topic that has long been overlooked in professional spaces, yet affect the vast majority of our workforce. Menopause is a significant life stage that impacts approximately 85 to 87% of library workers, and yet it remains under-discussed and often invisible within workplace culture. This program invites us to change that. We are here to engage in an open, thoughtful, and evidence-informed conversation about menopause and its impact on health, wellness, productivity, leadership, and organizational culture in librarianship. Importantly, this is not only a personal issue, it is a workplace issue, a leadership issue, and an equity issue. Today's discussion brings together both research and lived experiences. We will hear about emerging findings from a recent survey examining the menopausal experiences of women faculty in library information science programs across the United States and Canada, including insights into workplace policies, perceived support, and information needs. We will also hear perspectives that connect professional leadership with personal experience, including how we navigate menopause in positions of responsibility, advocate for self-care, and work to reduce stigma related to aging, body image, and productivity. And we will hear also about a national organization serving women. This conversation is ultimately about creating more inclusive, informed, and humane workplaces. It is about normalizing menopause as part of the professional life cycle, identifying gaps in institutional support, and exploring how we as individuals, colleagues, and leaders can foster environments where people feel supported at every stage of their lives and careers. So let's welcome our outstanding speakers, Dawn Perrent, Associate Dean of Administrative Services at the Thomas G. Carpenter Library at the University of North Florida, Deborah Charbonneau, Professor at Wayne State University School of Information Sciences, and Serene Goldmamin, Programs Manager at the Society for Women's Health Research. Thank you all for being here and for contributing your expertise and insights to this important discussion. I must say that I have received many emails and messages thanking for the program and also expressing that it was about time the Library Association addressed this matter. It seems that it's the first time a library association in the United States is addressing this matter. It's not the first time that a library association has members that experience the life stage. So good timing and welcome everyone again. And thank you so much to the speakers. Now I would like to welcome Cyrene as our first speaker.
Thank you, Loida. Let me just share my screen, if you'll give me a sec. Perfect. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. Okay, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be quickly discussing menopause at work and advancing awareness, care, and workplace support. My name is Srin Gulmamin, and I'm a programs manager at the Society for Women's Health Research. And today we'll explore menopause not just as a biological transition, but as a critical health and workplace issue that deserves more attention, better care, and stronger support systems. So at SWHR, we take a 360-degree approach to advancing women's health, and we do that through science, policy, and education. We convene interdisciplinary experts, identify gaps in research and care, and work to address disparities across diverse populations of women. And this work is especially important for menopause, which intersects with clinical care, workplace policy, and long-term health outcomes. So I wanted to do a quick check and see on a scale of 1 to 10, how familiar are you with menopause? So if people I'm not sure if there's a chat to be able to engage in, but if you are all interested in kind of gauging where you might be and kind of keeping that answer with you. And then let's see. And then I want to do a quick kind of knowledge check. And so in terms of the age, so most people have a range understanding of what menopause is, what it includes. But if you're in your houses or at work or what have you, thinking about what is the average age of menopause, what do you think the average age of menopause might be? And I'll give people a second. Okay, I see a range. Awesome. And so, oh, my slide. And so the average age actually is 51 for the onset of menopause. Um, Let me go to I next. Sorry, my slides are not going forward. All right, there we go. So I want to give a quick 101 of what is menopause before we kind of delve in. But in terms of menopause, it is defined as the point when a woman has gone 12 consecutive months without a menstrual period. But it's not a single moment, it's a part of a longer transition that includes perimenopause and postmenopause. And notably, nearly half of women don't fully understand this distinction before experiencing these symptoms. And I think this highlights a major gap in education and awareness. On average, we have about over 6,000 women entering menopause daily. And as we've kind of highlighted, the average age being 51, that transition period can really range between 3 to 7 years for some individuals. And so menopause can also occur earlier than we might note naturally because of early onset. So that can be because of the removal or damage to ovaries, surgery, chemo, radiation, and hysterectomies. And so it's really important to consider when we're talking about menopause, yes, that there is a natural transition, but there are also individuals, women who go through menopause earlier because of these types of situations. And so, why does menopause matter? Each year, about 1.3 million women in the US enter menopause, and the symptoms can last for a decade or more. And menopause generally has an impact on many systems and conditions, and that includes our bone, our heart, cognitive functioning, our hair, nails, our skin, and this transition affects, other things as a byproduct, our physical health, mental health, and our workplace functioning. And despite this, menopause remains underdiagnosed, undertreated, and often overlooked in both clinical and workplace settings. Here I'm just highlighting some common symptoms that are involved with menopause. Oftentimes when we talk about menopause, people like to reference the hot flashes. It's in many sitcoms and many colloquial jokes and things that people might be referencing. But it's really important to highlight that during this stage, there's a variety of symptoms that are impacting women. So while the hot flashes and night sweats are a key indicator, there are other symptoms as well as the genitourinary syndrome of menopause or GSM, weight gain, joint pain, sleep disturbances, and insomnia is a very big one as well. Brain fog, changes in mood, and depressive symptoms or increased anxiety. And also, it's really important to highlight that the differences across individuals and across racial and ethnic groups is also a significant piece here. And so, with women of color, they're more likely to experience earlier onset, longer transitions, and more severe symptoms. And at the same time, many women delay seeking care, and often for over a year due to lack of awareness, stigma, or limited access to knowledgeable providers. And in the SWAN study, so there's a study of women's health across the nation, this study showed that about 20% of women delayed their care before seeking treatment for more than a year. And this time period is not just about physical change, but the transformational life stage change that is occurring. And so, why does care matter? And why should you go seek care during this time period? Um, Menopause is not just about symptoms, it's also a critical window for long-term health. Your cardiovascular disease risk increases during this time period, and so making early and informed care is essential. And the risks for other conditions like osteoporosis and metabolic conditions can increase during this time if they're not addressed. Another stat that I found very striking was that about 50 to 70% of women experience GSM, but very few receive treatment. And with 50 to 70%, that's 5 in 10 women, 7 in 10 women, which is a significant portion of the population. And yet, many of these women are not screened or counseled appropriately. And so, this is missing an important opportunity to assist with prevention and intervention. I wanted to highlight some quick best practices for seeking care. I know sometimes we get overwhelmed or we're not sure where to start. And so these are just some quick tips that we had put together at SWHR. But the really big one is starting those conversations early with your provider. The perimenopause transition can be, like I said, between 3 to 7 years. And for some people, perimenopause starts in their early 30s. So it's really important to start those conversations with your provider, asking questions and trying to gauge more from that. Tracking your symptoms. So if you're unsure if you are going through menopause, which actually happens a lot to perimenopausal women, um, it's important to try to track those symptoms to make sure that it's associated with that and not other conditions. And then coming prepared for your appointments. And then in terms of the types of providers you might see, not all providers are equally trained in menopause. And so some providers you might consider going to that have a specialization and or just to start off your care include gynecologists, menopause specialists, endocrinologists, and your primary care. And these can be for a variety of reasons. As you've seen, the symptoms kind of vary as well in terms of the condition area and body system that it's impacting. Um, if you're interested in taking a picture, we also have a toolkit, and I'll kind of reference all of that at the end in terms of our resources, but questions that you might ask your provider to kind of help guide your care. And so preparing questions ahead of time can help you get the most out of your visit, and asking about diagnosis, treatment options, personal risk factors, and strategies for managing symptoms in daily life, including at work, can help kind of situate and make sure that you're getting the answers you need. I'll also highlight that our recommendation of bringing notes or a symptom tracker. I know myself, I have to use an agenda to make sure I stay on track. And so that's oftentimes been found to be helpful for women as well. In terms of menopause at work, so menopause also significantly impacts the workplace. And these symptoms can affect productivity, focus, and overall well-being. However, many workplaces are not equipped to support employees going through this transition. And when I say not equipped, this can be for a variety of reasons. It can be just from lack of awareness, but also it can be by the type of work or industry that the workplace is set in. And so SWHR, we conducted a exploratory survey analysis with menopause in the workplace. And these are some initial findings where we saw that the most bothersome menopause symptoms at work specifically were relating back to the sleep disturbances and insomnia, the brain fog, difficulty with concentration, learning and memory, the weight gain or changes in body shape, and then the fluctuations in mood or premenstrual syndrome, irritability, and difficulty coping. And so other symptoms that women reported disrupting their work included hot flashes, joint pain, depressive symptoms, and the increased anxiety or panic attacks. And I think here is kind of just highlighting why is this important to the workplace? Why should they care? In terms of the percentage of women who are involved in the workforce between the ages of 45 and 54, it's about 75%. That's a lot of that's a huge population that is also going through that transition during that period. And so menopause-related productivity losses also cost the US an estimated 1.8 billion annually. And this occurs during peak career years. And so this is more than just a health issue, it becomes an economic and workforce issue as well. Two terms I wanted to highlight also are becoming more used in terminology in HR and also in the research of workplace. But in terms of presenteeism, so a loss in productivity when an employee is not fully functioning in the workplace because they aren't feeling well. So oftentimes this looks like women going through their symptoms, still conducting their work, but not being fully there, and the absenteeism, so a loss in productivity due to unplanned leave from work. And so kind of from there, the companies that appropriately address the menopause experience can increase the productivity and improve retention of talented employees throughout their workforce. Also in our study, we had asked women to let us know across different industries what accommodations would be most helpful. And so I am including here the top 5 across all industries. So for all women, the top 5 included working from home, flexible work hours or alternative work schedules, temperature control, workshops or trainings to better understand menopause, and time off for medical appointments. And then the other side shows other accommodations that were mentioned that might be potentially helpful. Those including dedicated personal spaces, access to cold water or cooling devices, flexible uniforms, shifting in job duties to reduce physical labor, supportive services or devices, and extra or frequent breaks during the day. Also, I think it's really important to highlight that a lot of these workplace accommodations are things that other condition areas do have that haven't been considered necessarily for menopause. And so it's about also reframing what currently exists. And then talking about menopause in the workplace, oftentimes people don't feel comfortable with regards to talking about menopause or talking about their health in general. And so in our study, we found that half of the supervisors said they have participated in conversations, and 1/3 of them had said have not had conversations, but said that they would like to. So there is a willingness and openness about wanting to have those conversations. And so because of that, we were able to kind of direct and show, employees and employers how they can kind of collaborate to have those conversations. And you can kind of see here that that's highlighted. But just in general, using inclusive and non-assumptive language, encouraging open and judgment-free dialogue, and normalizing menopause just generally in the workplace. And so with that, I just wanted to summarize. So menopause is universal, but the experiences vary. Symptoms are real, common, and treatable. Specialist care matters, and so finding that support that you need, and then knowing that you deserve informed, personalized care and workplace support, and that education also equals empowerment. And so menopause is not the end of health; it's a transition to a new phase of life. And I wanted to just finalize here showing some of our menopause resources from SWHR. All of our toolkits, resource guides, papers are free and accessible to the public. So if you're interested in learning more, using tools to engage with your care or to bring back to the workplace, please feel free to engage in that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Serene. I do have one question, or perhaps that you can go over something you mentioned.
Sure.
Um, I received many emails about this program, and a number of them was about the perception that doctors do not listen. The the colleagues that email me express that they will say something, they will just say, well, you just go with the flow and this will happen and it will pass in 3 or 10 years. And so for those people, they were having problems identifying a good provider, a good doctor. And so
Mhm.
in your resources, do you have any recommendations for when that happens?
Yeah, I think in terms of, so I went over it very briefly in the presentation, but if for whatever reason you have a provider who is telling you that this is like the pain is natural and you just kind of get over it, there are specialists who are either in gynecology or in, I think in some other fields as well, where they are NAMS certified. So NAMS certification is specifically for menopause certified providers. And it shows that they have an awareness and the education base um, to provide care specifically as it relates to menopause within their field. And so that would be my recommendation is if somebody's telling you that this is normal and you feel like it's not normal, you can look for a specialist who has this certification to provide further guidance. And I'm sure the other panelists probably have advice as well in that regard. So.
Thank you so much. And if you don't mind, share a link or something about that certification. Thank you. Now, I would like to welcome Dawn Barron.
Hopefully you can see my slides. Are you seeing those now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, so I'm here, to talk a little bit more just about my experience as somebody who went through the perimenopause and now in the menopause and has been in libraries as a leader. And so just, that perspective of having to kind of find my way and what that meant for me working in the library industry. So, my background is currently I'm an associate dean at the University of North Florida. And I just got here to Florida in October of this last year. And before that, I was a dean of the libraries at Lenore Ryan University, which is in Hickory, North Carolina. And before becoming a librarian, I was a master's level clinical psychologist. So I'm coming at it from two perspectives. I have the mental health background, and then I have the library background and also the library administration. And so I have experience supervising people both in libraries and in the mental health field. So I have experience with that. And what I've found is that, just living through this myself is that I think, as it was mentioned, that this is both personal and it's professional. So it's really changed, how I view my career, how I work with others. And as I mentioned, perimenopause is a huge piece of it. So, it kind of gets lumped together sometimes. But, for me, I think the perimenopause phase was even more challenging than menopause. So it's such a long period of time. And like we mentioned, nobody really mentioned it, talked about it, prepared me for it. And then I was doing some, pretty, intense work where I wasn't even really feeling as though I could talk about it or acknowledge that it was happening. And so, it was just a very long, unpredictable phase for me. And so having gone through that, I think it's really important panels like this where we can talk about it, the research that's being done that was just shared so that we can understand our bodies, both personally and how it affects us at work. And it's good and bad. So it gives us a sense of empathy for others. It helps us, be there for other people that are going through it. But again, it's something that we really need to be able to talk about so that we can be sustainable in our careers. And, so to me, that's the key. When you're in your 20s and 30s and even 40s, you just think, oh, I'm just working and doing all my things. But you do realize at this point that you have to start planning for that last part of your career and what your workflow is going to be, in those last decade or so. So that's where I'm coming from. And again, the reality, is that, until very, very, very recently, it just wasn't talked about at all. So, and I remember I'm somebody that does talk about things. I come from that mental health background, so I talk about everything. And I would sometimes talk about this, and people were kind of like, oh, like it was, they weren't used to talking about it. But I thought, why not? Why can't we talk about it? But and I think that that's become more okay, that we can share our feelings about this, acknowledge things that are happening, because it is significant. And a lot of times it is invisible. So, I've had moments, where I've been in a meeting and I've had like a really strong, like hot flash. But, it's something where I had to stay focused. I had to stay present, even though this kind of tornado is happening in my body. It's not something people can always tell is happening or see. So we don't really acknowledge that reality all the time. And there's also, health impacts. So, I found myself, after very rarely going to the doctor to the point where I thought, why do I even have health insurance, to where every time I turned around, like we were just talking about, there's all these symptoms and you're trying to figure out what's going on, and, and trying to talk to maybe several different doctors, because as was just mentioned, not everybody is trained at the same level in dealing with menopause. And so sometimes you have to go and find somebody that actually can answer the questions that you have. And I was surprised how little people actually knew about it. And it was just kind of like, nah, so I'm like, you gotta be able to know more than that. But, so just those doctor visits were increased, and trying to take care of myself. And then just times when I didn't feel like myself at all, and just that was, very frustrating for me, to not really have the same energy towards things at times, and then you wonder, is this forever? Or is this just for a period of time? And there's a lot of worry that goes on behind that too, while you're, like we mentioned, just trying to really be at that top point of your career and trying to be, highly professional and very productive. And then you're dealing with all of this stuff in the background. But what it means is, just really, can we normalize this experience, without necessarily, you don't have to overshare, there's things that are private to you. You don't have to share all of this, but can we talk about it instead of acting like it's not happening at all? And what I've also experienced, I'm sure we, can all relate to this, is sort of a subtle but persistent ageism in the workplace. And I feel like this is particularly strong with women, towards women, but I mean, I don't have the research, so somebody else can speak to that. But, in my experience, there's things that I've noticed that people would say to me as a library leader that they wouldn't say to a male peer who is in my age range as a leader. So things like, saying things like, oh, you look good for your age. Like, what does that mean? So, or why are you even commenting on that? Or trying to find out how old I am. Like, oh, you seem pretty young. I'm thinking you're this age. Or like trying to find out how old you are, or putting you in maybe a mom role, or things like that. And so these are things that I have had to kind of deal with in the last maybe 10 or so years in my career. And the problem with that is it just shifts the focus from me and the expertise that I bring to my identity, my age, my appearance, who I am outside of work. And that can make it so that your experience is undervalued if that's not really addressed. And so really just trying to reclaim our experience, that yes, you being older is not a problem. You have experience, and it's just part of who you are. But again, just can we, trying to find that right balance of what can we and can we not share, in a workplace setting to normalize things and be able to have these kind of conversations. And then by having conversations, hopefully reduce any kind of stigma that might still be there. And then, of course, for me, coming from that background as a mental health provider, that's a big piece of it for me, the mental health, your identity, having that self-compassion. And so, as we've mentioned, it's not just a physical transition that people are going through, it's also an emotional one as well. And so I have had times where I have experienced, emotional and physical dysregulation in a work setting, and it's not always predictable. You don't know it's going to happen. And it can really catch you off guard. And so, especially if you're not understanding, perimenopause and menopause and that this can happen and why it's happening, that this is something that's happening in your body and your mind's trying to adjust to it as well. And so, I've had these moments, of brain fog that can really be humbling. Like, one time I had one of those Keurig machines in my office and I was making myself a cup of coffee and I heard all this noise and I realized I hadn't put the cup underneath the coffee. So kind of brain fog, like what happened just there? Sending an email with the wrong document link, or it's just things like that do happen, and so you have to just be compassionate with yourself, and realize that it's nothing to put yourself down about, but your body is going through a lot. You're changing, and you have to be a little forgiving with yourself at times like that, and try to see the humor in it too at times, but. There's also been times that have not been funny, like being tearful, things that I was never much of a crier, but I do in the last few years have found myself like easily crying about things. And so that's something that I've struggled with, and trying to, be transparent with people, about what's going on, so I've been open with my supervisor, like I am going through this, menopause, and sometimes I'm a little weepy and I don't, and so just being in those honest conversations about, what is happening, at times, so there's some context, for what's going on, again, without oversharing. But I think counseling is so important, and not in a reactive kind of way, like, oh, this is happening, there must be something wrong with me, but more proactive. This is something, a part of your care for yourself, just like you would go to the doctor to try to find out about maybe hormone replacement therapy or something with your sleep. The emotional dysregulation can be quite challenging. And so just going ahead and having a counselor that you can talk to, getting some strategies to help regulate yourself in those moments can be really helpful. So just forming a good relationship with a counselor is something I would highly recommend. And then a big piece for me has been re-identifying my identity beyond my career. So I don't know if this is just the generation I'm part of, Gen X, but careers are so important, and it's all about do everything you can and move up and do all these things. And I did all that, but it's like gets to the point where it's like, my job is a very important piece of who I am. I care about it very much, but it's not everything. It's one piece of who I am. And so really, I think the menopause is a way of kind of refocusing yourself and thinking about, like I mentioned, how do you want those next 10 to 15 years to be? And how are you forming what your identity is going to be as you move into that next part of your life outside of the career that you're in. And so, again, self-compassion is so important, that we do that, and realizing that we're going through a lot. I see somebody's hands up. I think I just got a couple more slides and then we'll see. Okay. But yeah, leadership and workplace implications, for me, like I've mentioned a couple times now, is just being able to normalize it, create a culture, a psychologically safe culture where people can talk, and that we bring ourselves to work. We are humans, and having a place where you can work and there's space to be a human that is going through different life phases, whether that, and I appreciated that when I was younger, when I was a single parent, I had children, and then and so there were accommodations at that point in my life, that people understood that's what I was going through. So I think it's the same thing, this is a life stage, like we mentioned, not a disease. And it's a way of working with people at different phases in their life. And so at this point for me, it's not volume, how much work can I get done? How productive can I be? But again, bringing the expertise I have, bringing those higher level thoughts and skills that I have, as opposed to just really, being a work machine. And for me, changing job roles was part of that for myself. I was in a dean role at a smaller university that was really understaffed. I was working nights, weekends, just trying to keep it going. And I just got to the point where I was like, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. And so, I had an opportunity to change jobs. It was a different career title, so from dean to associate dean, but at a larger university. I have great colleagues that I can work with. It's not all on me. And so that was a change that I made for myself, to really stop chasing a title so much as what is the best work-life balance for me. And then just really, I think we have to create that flexibility and that support for people, and then modeling what is sustainable for a leader. So as somebody's going through their career, I've had, people that I've worked with that have been just super, work, 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 and then you see them burn out. And so it's like, how can you show leadership in a way that is sustainable across different life stages? That's going to be a good work-life balance for everybody. And again, we can't lead if we can't be well. So we have to take care of ourselves first. And so, but menopause is really, less of a personal thing sometimes than it is, a leadership issue. And so, my last slide, almost last slide, is what has helped me. And so prioritizing that health and work-life balance, like I just mentioned, making changes in my life that were scary and hard, but I realized, this is what I needed to do to position myself to a better balance for me. Really working to build community with other women. So since I've moved, made my move to Florida, I've met some great groups of women that are my same age group, and been a great community. I have friends from where I was before. And so, there are people you can reach out to, ask them questions, let them know what's going on, and just kind of encourage you to form that kind of community for yourself. And look at trusted sources. I'm sure other people here will share things, but, look to see if somebody is certified as a specialist in menopause. But there's, the Menopause Society website is a great resource, to look at. Or a book that I really enjoyed was the Menopause Manifesto. That was one of the first books that I read where somebody really talked about what menopause was and was very open. That's Dr. Jen Gunter wrote that book. And there's podcasts. So just looking for those reputable sources that you can, they're conversational, but they're based in facts and research. And being able to advocate for yourself with your providers, being able to talk openly. And if a provider is not doing that with you, you can find a different one, So finding a provider that's going to listen to you, is going to help you advocate for yourself and get what you need. Some things, they are what they are. You can only do so much. The body is the body, but having somebody working with you as you're trying to find something that's a good solution for you. And you don't have to do it alone. Like I mentioned, have the people around you that can support you, with your treatment providers, your counselor, your friends, your colleagues, and doing that, with other people. And this slide's a little cheesy, but I think it's true. So life doesn't end with menopause. It's the beginning of a new adventure. Strap in and enjoy the ride. That's what Helen Mirren says. So like we mentioned, I think is not an end. This is a transition into another phase of your life, where you're kind of a different and a better version of yourself even. And so I've heard of a term called postmenopausal bliss, where people get through menopause and they're actually feeling really fantastic. So I'm hoping that's true. I hope I'm getting there. So, but I think that, this is just a phase of our life. Sometimes I hear people that are talking about dreading it and being afraid of it. And it's not comfortable to go through it, but it is just part of being a human, and you're going to get through it and it's going to be great. So I'm going to stop my share. And I might have been a little faster, maybe I'm on time, but I saw somebody's hand was up. So if that was for me, just let me know.
Thank you, Dawn. We are taking questions through the Q&A section. So if someone would like to ask something, please just write it there. I see one question, and we're going to take that at the end. So please hang tight. And now, if the speakers would like to address something on the chat, that's great. But in voice, We're going to address it at the end. And now I'd like to welcome Deborah Charbonnier. You're muted.
Hello, my name is Deborah Charbonneau, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Excellent. Okay. As I said, my name is Deborah Charbonneau, and I'm a professor at Wayne State University in the School of Information Sciences, which is located in Detroit, Michigan. I am pleased to have this opportunity to present my research with you. I did a study of library science faculty about their menopausal experiences in the workplace. Before I begin, I want to thank Serene and Dawn for their wonderful presentations. And I also appreciate the sponsors. I'd like to thank the sponsors. I'd like to thank Reforma and ALA Commission on the status of women in librarianship for hosting this important and timely webinar. To provide context for my study, here's one definition of menopause. Menopause, or the cessation of menstruation, is a normal stage of life. The average age of menopause is 51 years, which is what Serene had said as well. However, this can occur much earlier, either naturally or because of surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, or any number of reasons. In 2020, globally, 657 million women were aged 45 to 59. And overall, 47% of these women worldwide contributed to the labor force. So these numbers come from EMAS, which is a society, and I have a reference to those numbers in that website at the end. So navigating the challenges of menopause while balancing work responsibilities can be overwhelming for women. And we need to acknowledge these aspects of women's health and their career journeys. On the previous slide, I provided one broad definition of menopause. On this slide, there are other definitions, and although the term menopause is often used loosely to describe the entire time frame of midlife changes, there are different stages to menopause. And this comes from the same society where Serene is affiliated with as well. So I've provided definitions just to help provide context for my study as well. So there's perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And I won't read them because I know Serene has already covered these as well. But the important thing is that there are distinctions in different phases, although the term menopause is often used as a broad overarching term. So why study menopause in the workplace? Menopause is a natural part of working women's lives, and workforce participation by women has grown in recent decades. So given that increasing numbers of women will be working during their menopausal transition and postmenopausal, understanding the unique life phases, such as menopause, can lead to enhanced workplace inclusivity. I was interested in conducting the study because limited research currently exists on the work-related experiences of peri- and postmenopausal women. And to address this gap in the literature, my study explored a number of research questions around menopausal experiences of women in the workplace. In this presentation, I will focus on menopausal symptoms, any impact of symptoms on work, and the information seeking of peri- and postmenopausal women faculty. So a little bit about my study. I used an online Qualtrics survey, which was built around the research questions, and I developed the survey and I pre-tested it before disseminating it. I then distributed the online survey via an email listserv, which was focused on library science faculty. And this was distributed in October 2025, so in the fall. And the target audience for my survey was peri- and postmenopausal women faculty in library and information science programs in the United States and Canada who are currently experiencing or have previously experienced menopause while working. So anyone that identified with that criteria were welcome to participate in the online survey. This slide provides some demographic information of the survey participants. In total, I had 64 respondents. The breakdown of participants by age group is provided on the slide as well. I did provide an other option as well. However, nobody provided any other age information. And you can see, I just wanted to note that the age group of 50 to 54 years of age was the most common age group among the survey participants. I also asked participants to describe or to identify where their current university or institution was located. And 92% of the participants were based in the United States and 8% in Canada. I also asked participants to describe their races or ethnicities. And this was left open-ended, and 93% of the respondents identified as white, 4% as Hispanic or Latino ethnicity, Black or African American was 2%, and Asian was 1%. Okay, next I will share some of my survey findings. Menopause symptoms can vary greatly, but it can include hot flashes, insomnia, anxiety, brain fog, and depression, and many other things, which can have an impact on women's daily lives, as well as their workplace experiences. I asked survey participants to indicate which menopause symptoms affected their work the most. And all of the results that I will be reporting are based on a total of 64 respondents. So the top 5 menopausal symptoms that were reported were brain fog and memory issues were the most common at 69%. And this was followed by fatigue or poor sleep, then hot flashes or night sweats, mood swings or irritability, and then anxiety. So this was the top 5. These were the top 5 menopausal experiences that were reported by the survey participants. I was also interested in learning how menopause symptoms had impacted their work in both positive and negative ways. And participants could select all that applied from a number of statements. Here are some of the impacts, and this is in ranked order. Women reported reduced focus, communication challenges, embarrassment, stigma, the confidence to speak up, prioritizing meaningful work, missed deadlines, and established boundaries. As I mentioned, I wanted to include some positive statements because often menopause research focuses on challenges, and we do need research in this area. However, I also wanted to learn if menopause resulted in any benefits or positive experiences in the workplace. And so I've highlighted those in a different color. So we see that women are reporting their menopausal experiences have given them the confidence to speak up, to prioritize work that is meaningful to them, and to even establish boundaries. So I think that is really interesting. I also asked survey participants how comfortable they were discussing their symptoms or asking for support from their employer. On the slide, you can see that the first category that is listed, extremely uncomfortable at 33%, was the most category that was selected among the survey participants, followed by neither comfortable or uncomfortable, somewhat uncomfortable, somewhat comfortable, and extremely comfortable. So again, here we see that extremely uncomfortable was the most frequently reported. And I further wanted to learn about the types of information that women sought during menopause. And the topics are listed on the slide. And the most common topics that women desired were first, to understand perimenopause and menopause. And this was followed by information about managing symptoms. Also, emotional and mental health during menopause, nutrition and lifestyle changes, hormone replacement therapy, conversations with health providers, and natural and alternative remedies. Now, these findings can be useful. For example, this has implications for women's health information services. If you wanted to provide relevant reproductive health information to meet the needs of midlife women, as librarians, this information might be useful again for planning outreach, information services, or even developing a LibGuide with resources to support midlife women. Okay, so I've provided a brief summary of some of my quantitative survey findings, which were reported out on previous slides as percentages and frequency counts. And now I wanted to share some direct quotes with you from the survey participants. I asked an open-ended question, and survey respondents could freely elaborate in their own words. I asked, what information or support from your employer would have been helpful as you approached menopause and during it. And these were some of the responses. So I'll just read them to you. One respondent shared, safety to discuss it. Menopause feels like a no-go in terms of discussions. Another respondent shared, I think more women's health wellness related to programming in general would be helpful for my organization. They don't provide any of that. Another participant wrote, a less stressful work culture. Faculty are expected to take care of students on top of their other duties, and that's really hard to manage when you're going through an invisible transition that's a taboo topic. And another comment that I selected and pulled out is the following. There is a lot of support accommodations for pregnant faculty and staff and faculty, as well as for new parents. It would be great if even a token of effort could be made by HR associate deans to address the entire life cycle and provide some support and understanding. So some great comments, and the highlighting and in the different colors are my attempts of pulling out some themes, some interesting salient themes I think we could discuss that are worth noting, such as having safe workplace environments, more wellness programming, improved work culture. Again, we see there's this notion that menopause is still invisible and a taboo topic, and something that women should go through on their own and suffer in silence. And final comment, I think, also speaks to this idea that some aspects of women's reproductive health are supported, while other aspects, such as menopause, are still under-acknowledged. Okay. So these findings suggest that many organizations still fail to recognize that menopause symptoms can have an impact on women in the workplace. And as a result, organizations can take steps to create more menopause-friendly workplaces. And so I've offered some potential recommendations, and I think these reinforce some of the recommendations that our previous panelists, the previous presentations also offered. And so what employers and organizations can do is work towards creating more open, inclusive, and supportive cultures regarding menopause. And because of the lack of conversation around menopause, driven in part by stigma and ageism, this leads many women to suffer in silence. So organizations can make health and well-being during menopause a priority for the organization. And this can ensure a positive approach, but also ensures that women with menopausal symptoms are not stigmatized or discriminated against, and that staff are retained. We also know that education is vital to normalizing menopause. So there's a need for training for both managers and employers to help build more of an awareness. And organizations can do a better job of ensuring the provision of training for managers and supervisors on how to have sensitive conversations at work. Organizations can also review and update their policies. For example, I'm going to ask the audience, do you have a zero tolerance policy at your workplace to bullying, harassment, victimization, or belittling of women with menopause symptoms? And if not, maybe this is something that you can advocate for. And if there are administrators in the audience as well, you could take the lead on and revising and updating the policies as well. Also, you might want to revisit flexible work arrangement policies as well. So there's a need to review and update policies. And some of the other practical suggestions, again, were mentioned by, I believe, some of the previous speakers, but I'll just echo them because I think they are practical things that would make a difference. Consider flexible work hours, temperature control, having access to cool water or cooling devices such as fans. You can have fans that have USB ports you can plug right into your computer. So there are things that employers can provide. And again, this echoes back to some of the education recommendations. Having managers trained to have sensitive conversations at work with dignity and respect would go a long way. So ultimately, these recommendations work towards a common goal, which is empowering women to remain in the workforce confidently without compromising their health or potential. So with these insights from survey participants, organizations can create a more gender equity-focused policies, practices, and resources to support women undergoing these natural life stage transitions. Overall, we want to take steps to support women throughout their reproductive life. And future research would be helpful as well. I'm grateful to the 64 respondents, 64 women that took the time to respond to my survey. However, more research is needed. We know that attitudes and experiences of women and aging, around women and aging and reproductive health are culturally situated. So more research with a diverse group of women would be welcomed as well and is needed. Thank you. I'm happy to entertain your questions and comments during the Q&A period. Here are the references.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
want to say that this webinar has really nice flow. We started with the big picture, right? The resources. Then we have a sort of like a personal, but also clinical view from Dawn. And then Deborah with this research, which is very revealing and useful to also see how other colleagues are experiencing this stage of life. Now, we have some questions, and I think we're going to go a little bit over the hour, but I think it's important. And so I will invite the speakers to also tuning into the question and answer section here. There is someone asking, how do I talk to my boss about, the mental health that is taking per what is written here, right? Terrible beating. And then there's another question about what kind of support, if any, have you received from your employer? They might be a bit related. Let's take those two first, or if you want to answer them as one. And I won't call the speakers, but if you feel like you can contribute something, please just jump in. The speakers.
I would just
Yes.
say for the mental health, that it's up to you how much you want to share. So you could keep it really minimal and just say, I'm having some health concerns. If you want to keep it like that, and I might be having more appointments. I may have to, step out from time to time. Or you can even be a little more directive. It just depends on your relationship or how safe, again, psychologically safe you feel saying, this is related to some things I'm going through right now with perimenopause or menopause. And these are some of the things I might need in terms of flexibility to get to appointments and whatnot, and just kind of start that conversation.
I'll also add in relation to that conversation, sometimes we don't necessarily feel comfortable with our bosses, but you should have somebody who is either HR or who manages like people at your organization. And they are oftentimes the person, if you're interested in having accommodations or talking through what options you have, that they are a good person to go to. And I'll also say, speaking with a provider before you go to HR is helpful oftentimes because they might be considering things in their care for you that you might not have considered. And so kind of talking to your provider first, saying, this is what I'm going through, this is how it's impacting my work. What are some things that you think that might be helpful for me that I can bring back to my organization? Oftentimes, both the HR and the provider don't really know what you need. So you being that communicative person can help to tailor that conversation.
Thank you. All right, so we have mental health and what are the support received from an employer, right? That's floating there, but let's go to another one here. What impact do you think legislation has related to accommodations for people experiencing life cycle changes? For example, there is legislation protecting pregnant people and their need for accommodations, but does legislation exist for menopause? And that is the question I've received, and also I was at an event recently, and they knew about this webinar, and they were saying how almost everybody, when they're in school, learn about the period and about pregnancy and adolescence, pregnancies, and all that. But this life stage is not really shared. They don't recall that. So that's another piece of this, right? How these themes are not being talked about. If someone has information about this legislation, I'm not aware of anything related to that at legislative level.
I can give some quick notes just about that. I know there's been some bills that have been introduced. I think they were introduced in 2025 at the federal level. There are states that have some menopause policies in place. I'm not sure all of the states. I think there's about 17 that have menopause recognized um, in some fashion. And I will say also that some of the policies that we think about when we're talking about menopause, like ADA, FMLA, the ADAA, and there's, I think, one other policy, they also can be useful when you're having discussions with your employer. So they're not, just because it's not specific to menopause doesn't mean those policies don't apply to you.
All right, so is any of that included in the toolkit that you shared earlier
Yeah, we have a lot of information about that as well.
on the website? Okay, great. Now here I have Tina. Are you still with us? I think you had a question. Oh, okay. I see it. You continued in the next row here. All right, so is Serene here? We have a question for you. Is that 75% across the board for workplaces? And did those numbers skew higher for librarianship, if you have any information about that?
I think the 75% is the women who participate between those ages. And so it's not specific to, it's across all industries. Um, I don't have the librarianship, but that would be interesting. I think maybe, Deborah, if you have more information on that, I'd be very curious. Um, but in terms of like the percentage, that is just in terms of who's involved. It doesn't necessarily the people who are going through menopause, although that is the age group generally, as we've touched on, that is going through that. I'm not sure if I addressed the full question.
Okay, well, thank you. The last question here is if there are any tips in getting an accommodation from a doctor for workplace adjustments related to all these stages. And it says something else there about the institution. Okay, yes, they're having some issues in the institution. Do any of the speakers have any contributions related to this particular question? Or if Serene has seen any practices out there? No,
You just
yeah,
support for asking for accommodations. I think it goes back to like preparing for the conversation with your provider. So going in, knowing, what is impacting you with work, because you may have a variety of symptoms related to menopause, but it might be these three specifically that are really, causing your work to, for you to struggle at work. And so I would say preparing what you're going to share with your provider. This is how it's impacting your work. And then I think Google is a great tool, like in terms of being able to look up things that have worked for other people. And it may not necessarily work for you, but it is something that you can suggest and see if it does. And also, it's an iterative process. That's the other thing I think with accommodations people don't realize. Just because you've sent in and you've proposed these accommodations doesn't mean that you cannot change them later on, or that you might not get a suggestion to change something later on. Your care may also change later on. So those are things to keep in mind. Um, I think just being an advocate for yourself. Also, if you have a colleague who can be an advocate for you in terms of, whether that's at HR or if it's a colleague, just to have somebody to talk to, that's also, I would say, a recommendation because they can be a good person to bounce things off of.
all right, and we're going to take one more question here for Deborah, and then I have some very few next steps about this theme. Deborah, we have a question there. You can see it, perhaps. What surprised you from the results?
Thank you, Shannon, for the question. I was also surprised that some women were comfortable or extremely comfortable talking with their employer. I wish I knew a little bit more about the context. It could be that they had a woman supervisor that may be at the same age and that was more compassionate. I don't really know, or maybe it was a man that they had a male administrator that they had a great relationship with, that had an open create an open, comfortable culture. I'm not really sure what the context is, but I think that's great, and it's encouraging to see that some women reported being comfortable or extremely comfortable asking for support for their menopause symptoms in the workplace.
Thank you, Deborah. And this conversation today tells me that there's need about these themes in librarianship. My perception, and I sit where I can work with different library associations around the world, is that this is perhaps the first program at the national level or even international about menopause and, perimenopause, postmenopause, in librarianship. And so very interesting. So we need to then now expand, right? Bring these concerns and issues to our own groups, state level, regional level, your country level. I want to share, I got a message from a colleague that I want to say she's in Hungary. And she said that, oh my God, she wrote to me in LinkedIn saying, this is a surprise, it's good, and we need more of that. And she's going to try to do something in her country. So this is a movement, right? And some people are within this life stage and others aren't. But if we are female and we have these chromosomes, it's going to happen. And so we should embrace each other and support these type of initiatives. And so hopefully either from Reforma or ALA, there can be other events. And I know there's so many other things that we still need to talk about, but I think this has been a very good first. And we will share the recording. It might take a little bit, a few weeks, but we will share it during the same on the same channels, the ALA Connect, and I will probably try to get it on the IFLA list as well. Thank you so much to our speakers for their generous time, and to the attendees. And stay tuned. Maybe we have another event related to this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the speakers don't go. Let's try to take a picture. I feel like we